Click subscribe to get daily Manchester United content from Passionate Reds, only on All for United.
It's 6 o'clock here in the United Kingdom. Welcome to this evening's All for United, the only show where great Manchester United content and discussion takes place. I am Grant Campbell. I'm your host for this evening's show. To my right is the one and only Reese. How you doing, my good man?
Yeah, I'm doing all right, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's been a while.
And just below us is the one and only John. How you doing, my good man?
I'm very well, thank you. Pretty sad from the first stream earlier today.
Well, it's great to have you both on, gentlemen. It's been a really interesting last 48 hours. Obviously, we had the thrill of beating Norwich City in the Premiership, and then, of course, we are hearing reports that obviously Manchester United have had problems at their camp, tested positive for COVID cases. We believe currently, as things stand, that the game at the weekend, or this midweek, is going ahead against Brentford for the moment. If we do hear any updates throughout the show, you'll be able to hear it here first on All for United. Remember, you can like and subscribe, so please do that. You can find us on All for United on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, throughout. You can also search for us on Instagram and other social media channels as well. Well, gents, it's been a really interesting weekend, of course, so we have to really start off very briefly by talking about the victory over Norwich City. Was it a classic? But United won it by a 1-0. Cristiano Ronaldo scoring that penalty in the second half. Reece, I'm going to come to you first. What was your thoughts on the game?
It was a very poor performance, poor game. A soft penalty got us the win in the end. We at least got a goal, but at the end of the day, it wasn't a great performance, but at least we won. We got 3 points, another clean sheet. But I think that game identified that there's a few players on the microscope now that are going to lose their position very shortly because they're just not turning up and they're just consistently playing poor. So at least that game against Norwich has identified certain players don't deserve to be starting. Some players do. And I'm just glad that we won, but I was quite surprised by the different level of intensity. That first 11 had a full week off and they played like that. It was unacceptable. But at least we won. That's the only good thing you could say is identify players that shouldn't be starting, but at least we got to win another clean sheet. So it's great.
Absolutely. John, before I come to you, Connor Roberts, a big contributor to the podcast, says, big up to John. Great to see you on the shows finally, mate. Hopefully see you at LSV soon for the women's team. Weekly Armchair Sports Talk also says evening to everybody as well. John, I'm going to come to you. I was listening to the Truly Football Show earlier today, and Daniel Story was quoting, saying that it was a bit of an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer-esque style performance. What was your thoughts on that, and has Daniel got a point?
Yeah, I would probably agree with that because I felt the performance, if you didn't know Rangnick, the coaches and the psychologists he brought in, you'd think it was pretty much Ole Gunnar Solskjaer performance. We didn't dominate the game. We didn't put much pressure on Norwich at all during the game, and we got lucky with one moment with the penalty. And if it wasn't for De Gea, we would have not won that game, probably lost it. And I think Norwich can count themselves a bit lucky not to have got a result in that game, and we can have no complaints. To echo what Reece was saying, some of the players' performances were absolutely pathetic from my perspective. I think Rashford, since coming back from injury, he's just not hit any form. Bruno, as we know, has been off this season, and even aside from the penalty, Ronaldo didn't have a great game either. And I just think, like I say, the only positive I can think of that game was that we've kept 2 clean sheets in managed 2 Premier League games. And so I think it's shoring up the defence. But having said that, Norwich did have chances, which another team would have probably taken. If we played like that against a semi-decent team, we would have easily lost that game. But thankfully we got the win.
Reese, in terms of the game itself, did we learn a lot about what a good goalkeeper David De Gea was once again with the series of great saves he made, particularly in the second half?
I think if you actually realise that he isn't a good goalkeeper, then I'd be seriously questioning people. Like, if you thought he isn't a good goalkeeper, he is a good goalkeeper. He's had very poor form the past 18, 19 months. That's not going to be ignored. But you see on social media, and it's so funny. This is literally why I laugh at times with social media, is that De Gea can have one massive mistake, right? As an example, he can have a massive mistake in one game or dropping for Henderson. And you see the Henderson fanboys, and they're like, oh, Henderson, he had such a great game today. Yeah, he got dragged off after 60 minutes. Wow, that's great. Still can see the howler. Like this is the problem for me, is like De Gea's a great goal, but you've a great goalkeeper, but then you have to see a contrast in how point of view is reflected on social media, where people just immediately are waiting for him to make a mistake so they can go, now's the time to put Henderson in goal. And it's great to see the difference when, and I hate when they make mistakes, but when Henderson makes a mistake, you see the De Gea fans then going, that's why we don't want him to replace De Gea in the first place. So I'm like, why not just appreciate two good goalkeepers? De Gea's having a very good season. He's recognised he's made mistakes. He's got to improve on certain aspects of his game, and he's thriving off it. Even though we conceded against 4 against Watford, 5 against Liverpool, who's been our best player this season? David De Gea.
Absolutely agree.
So,
Absolutely
like, at the end of it, like, yeah, he's a top goalkeeper. He had a very poor 18, 19 months. So does every top player. They will have a poor run of form, poor period, and it happens. But the difference is, at least he's came back fighting. At least he's identified weaknesses in his game, and he's trying to reflect on that. And the difference is, he's actually shown a difference on the field.
Yeah. John, same question to you. I mean, what was your thoughts on De Gea's performances at the weekend?
Oh, he was superb, and like Reece said, he's been our best player this season by a country mile. He did have a poor 18 months or so, and he's come back fighting this summer, since the summer rather. And yeah, for me, he deserves to be the number one again. And I know there's been plenty of debate regarding who should be the number one. I think Henderson is a very good goalkeeper, and I think the strengths of Henderson in terms of coming off his line is a weakness for De Gea. But you can't ignore the fact De Gea is by far a better shot stopper. So if you have the strengths, if you put the strengths together from both goalkeepers, you'd have the perfect goalkeeper. And obviously, weakness De Gea is coming off his line, although he did catch a couple of good balls against Norwich. But for me, at this moment, De Gea is the better of the two, and for me, he should be the number one until he maybe makes a few mistakes or something. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Ranić played a 4-2-2-2 in this game. John, I'll come back to you on that. I mean, do you think that is a system that he will deploy for the majority of the rest of the season? Or do we think we may need to adapt to a 3 in certain games, particularly maybe away from home in Europe, for example, or in a big game at home in the Premier League? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for most games he will deploy the 4-2-2-2, but what he was saying when he became manager was that he will find a formation whichever he thinks suits the team. So I do think he will be adaptable certain games. You got to remember, second half of the season, we still got to go to City, we still got to go to Anfield, and you're probably going to need to be more defensively sound. I'm not sure a 4-2-2-2 would work in that scenario, but it just depends. But yes, I do think that will be the main formation for the rest of the season. but I think he will be adaptable in certain games, and but we'll just have to wait and see what happens.
I mean, John's made some great points there, Reese. I mean, we've talked quite a lot in the past about players that might thrive in Ralph's system. Who is, you think, going to go well in here, and who might struggle based on what we saw at the weekend with Norwich? He's on mute again.
That's classic. First time I've done that. I think when it comes to who's going to thrive and who's going to succeed, I think 2 games in, frankly, right now.
Is it too early to say?
I think the only one so far that you could say has actually benefited is Fred. Fred's the only player so far that's benefited. Out of all of them, like, he's actually been more consistent. I think at the end of the day, you have to judge it based on 5, 6, 7 games down the line first before we can say, it's definitely going to thrive. Because I originally had ideas about who I thought was going to thrive at the beginning. Not realistically, they've not had an opportunity yet, or they're just not being consistent. It's just a matter of we have to wait a certain period of time, let him gel with the team, let him get used to the squad first. Otherwise, we could end up being completely wrong about who's going to thrive, who's going to fail. The one thing that will properly determine where we go is what he sees in training, because I guarantee what he saw against Norwich, he is not going to like, and he is going to remind them of that. The one thing I like is the fact is when it comes to a press conference or when it comes to talking after, or even talking after the game, like post-match, he doesn't bullshit.
Yes.
That's the difference between Ralph Rangnick and in previous regimes, and I'm not even going to bother getting into it all, but we try harder next time for the win. That's not what he's going to say. He's going to identify where we went wrong, and he's going to actually systematically work on it with his coaching staff. At least he's actually identifying weaknesses rather than just saying, next time we'll just do better. That's not what it should be about. Identify weaknesses, identify who isn't good enough. If you have to, weed them out, drop them, do whatever you have to do. But at the end of the day, he'll make the decisions, even if it's the ones we don't like. The cutthroat decisions need to be done. So I'm more or less saying we just wait for a little while.
I actually agree with a lot of that, and I think it shows that ruthlessness of a manager that maybe United have lacked for quite a few years now. I mean, I've nothing against Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think he did a very astute job at Manchester United in certain periods, but you do need that winning mentality, that person that's going to get their fist out and say, come on, guys, you've got to step up and show that you want to play for the red shirt and really show that you're capable of turning up in the big games. And I think you made a very good point on that, Reece, and I think that's very well respected. John, do you have anything to add on that? I mean, do you think there's certain players that's going to flourish in that 4-2-2-2, or who do you think is under pressure for their places?
Yeah, but I think there are certain players who will and who are currently benefiting from it. I think Fred, for example, since Oli got the sack, his performances have improved over the last couple of weeks or so. I think he'll be a massively key player in that. McTominay has done okay as well. The full back Stilo has improved. In terms of players who won't benefit from it, you just have to look at the young boys' game. Wan-Bissaka struggled. I know it's only one game, but he's out of form. Question marks. We thought Van der Beek might benefit from it, but after the young boys' game, he made an error for the goal, and he didn't quite take his opportunity. But you've got to look at other players like will Pogba benefit from it? Bruno doesn't appear to be benefiting from it at the moment, but we'll wait and see. I think what the 4-2-2-2 does allow for potentially when he comes back is potentially a Ronaldo-Cavani partnership up front potentially whenever he comes back. And I think that will be a strength for our team, because you only saw when they played together against Tottenham, and they were absolutely brilliant together. And I think when Cavani's fit, we should go for that. And I think the defence is because we've tried Greenwood supporting Ronaldo, we've tried Rashford, and they're not benefiting. And like I say, it is early days at the moment. It will take time for the players to adapt, but there are certain players, which I mentioned, who I think will genuinely struggle to get in the team.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just saying once again, if you're following the show on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter tonight, please like and subscribe. All for United. Never miss a show when we go live.
I think the academy players will benefit more. I think the academy players that were called up to play the Champions League game, if they get more opportunities because they're younger, and that's what he identifies, he likes to work with young players. I think they'll benefit a bit more than most senior players, purely 100%. Because it's easier to make a younger player adapt to a certain style rather than as like a senior player. We'll see what happens, but I think a few players that may have like caught your eye a little bit differently will certainly improve. I think some of them will regress. At the end of the day, this is what the system's going to identify. This system will identify players that don't even belong at Man United. It will expose certain players, and it will expose poor decisions.
I mean, do you guys think United need to build for the here and now rather than think about building for the next 2-3 years? Because let's look at the facts here. Ronaldo isn't getting any younger. Cavani's certainly not getting any younger. You've got Greenwood there, who's in smashing form for Man United. You've got other players there like Sancho, who I think has certainly looked like he's turning a bit of a corner. You know, we mentioned some of the younger guys who are playing in the young boys game, and you guys have talked about it there. With respect to Ronaldo and Cavani, who are fantastic players in their own right, do United need to be thinking 3-4 years down the line, or do they need to be thinking more about the here and now?
Yeah, I think you've got to look to the future, but I think based on the here and now, you'll need to identify what players are good enough and what players are not good enough. For me, like you just look at, from my perspective, obviously Ollie deserved to go with some of the results. However, some of the players' performances were absolutely despicable, and I think what this new system will identify will be what players United will need in order to challenge within 2 to 3 years, hopefully. Yes. This is why I have question marks over certain players and some key players as well. Like I'm a bit concerned whether Rashford might have hit his ceiling potentially. You know, I'm not saying I'd get rid of him. I love him to say and improve, but you just need to see how he'll respond to that and whether he can improve because there are question marks about him. You'll also see players like Greenwood, for example. He's a young man, how he'll adapt. One player I would say the system will benefit is Robbie Sancho. I thought he was, out of all our forward players, I didn't think he was great against Norwich, but I think he was possibly the best one out of all of them. And for me, I think he was a bit unlucky to be the one who was subbed off after an hour, because you could have taken any of the others off. Now I think it was unlucky that he was one who was taken off. But yeah, I do think it is about building for the future. I think this system will allow, because a lot of people reckon Greenwood could become a number 9 one day. And with this system, if you play him alongside Ronaldo, within 2 to 3 years, he might be able to take the number 9 position. He's not quite there yet. As Rangnick said, he's more of a 9.5, but maybe for this system, if he plays alongside Ronaldo, he might eventually become our main striker, but only time will tell with that. So, yeah.
I think it's a really interesting dynamic, Reece, and I was going to come on to talk about Rashford specifically a little bit later on, but we may as well talk about it just now. Do you think he is under pressure after the recent form of Greenwood and obviously Cavani in line for a comeback?
Oh, it's not that he's under pressure. He's under massive pressure. He's been awful our past 3-4 games.
Why do you think he's under pressure? What is he not playing in the right position? Is he not making
he's
the
just
right
not playing
runs?
well.
Is he looking nervous? Is he lacking confidence?
I don't know what it is. Like, I honestly haven't got a clue what is going on with Marcus Rashford, but I like Marcus Rashford. I think in the position he's playing in, like playing off a target man, his pace should benefit a target man number 9. It should benefit the fact that he can exploit space. He's got the burst of pace to do it. But the fact is, like, I just look at it and it's the same mistakes over and over. Like caught offside, timing, went to attack teams, went to dribble properly. He's just not got that timing right, and it's recurrent every single game. And yeah, he's a fantastic player. He pops up with a goal and assist, and he can be a difference maker. But that doesn't always mean you're actually having a good game. Like, I want to see him improve on those weaknesses because he's a phenomenal talent. He's a phenomenal player, but those weaknesses really are a nightmare.
Yeah,
especially if he does not improve them. If he does not improve those weaknesses, there's other players that will gladly take his place and keep him out of the team.
I mean, 2 league goals this season. 2 league goals in 9 games. 1 assist. It's not particularly great numbers. And Jarvis Cocker actually has just brought a really good point. He just says Rashford needs a break from football for a couple of months to regain his focus. Interesting point of view. And I not one I disagree with in some respects, but to be fair to Rashford, I still personally don't know what his best position is because we've seen him play off the left-hand side. We've seen him play through the centre. You know, I think Ollie's played him on the right at times. I think he looks a little disillusioned as to where his best position is. John, what do you think on that?
Yeah, I think so, because I think with this new system, the 4-2-2-2, they're not genuine wide players. You know, like the only wide players tend to be the fullbacks. Now you have Sancho and Bruno who do tend to drift to the sides, but the way it's shaped up, it's like half wing, half central. So it's not genuine wingers. Aside from that, he's not a great number 9 in terms of like supporting the striker. I mean, I personally think his best position is on the left, but does this system allow for that? And I also think with him that he's he's not the greatest finisher, and he, like Reece said, he always seems to be offside. He never seems to get his head up. Every time he gets the ball, he just looks to dribble, and when he does pass it, it's quite slow. And I do think he's certainly under a lot of pressure, and I just genuinely think that he is one that might struggle. And I think for the moment, the performances where he's done okay since he's come back have been when he's come off the bench. Like he scored in his first game back against Leicester, didn't he, coming off the bench? I think the Villarreal game away from home, I think he came off the bench in that game and he did okay. For me, he should have a place on the bench for the time being. And I think at this moment, he's better coming off the bench when the defender's legs are tired and he can run at them. For me, that's what role I'd have for him at this present moment. But yeah, he's certainly under a lot of pressure.
I think what United need to do as well is they need to take a City approach. We just buy players hoping that they work out, whereas City will attack a weakness. Like, we all remember like that stupid season where they finished, 4th under Guardiola, and then they went and bought 4 fullbacks. Like, if we've got a weakness, we should actually attack it. So like, if defence are an issue, instead of buying forward players, you buy defenders. You've got to improve there, and then you work your way forward. I think United don't have that plan. I think that's something that we need to do long term. In terms of Marcus Rashford, very good player. He has some great attributes to contribute to the team. The only thing is, though, it's just that recurring weakness where it's decision making off that time. It's not always going to be his fault. There's going to be defenders who press against him because they know his pace. If they get him offside, it's going to catch him. But in terms of as an asset to the team, he is an asset. He just really needs to just work on that timing. If he gets that timing nailed on, he can be an absolute threat to anybody.
Yeah. Jarvis Cocker tonight is on absolute fire. He just said Rashford's biggest strength is pace, and we need him in the big games when there's space. I mean, ultimately, guys, is the system something that you have to implement? And if it doesn't suit certain players, then that's the nature of the beast. I mean, an example I'm going to use is Steve Clarke at Scotland, because you look at the situation he had with Andy Robertson and Kieran Tierney in defence. And this is, in some respects, albeit in a more attacking sense, a similar potential issue that United could have. Reece?
Possibly. Like, if you've got competition for places and then you've got big decisions to make, for any manager, obviously you want those decisions because you want your squad to be at its absolute peak and continue to build and keep getting better and better, and you want your players to continue to improve game by game, season on season. So I do get the point. But the one thing is though, like, at least you've got a manager and you've got a coaching staff that's actually very hands-on that will help you improve your mistakes. If he doesn't improve, then the one person you can't blame on this is Rangnick, because at least you've got somebody who's hands-on who actually wants to engage and improve his players. If you don't improve, then that's not down to him. In this circumstance, it's not down to him.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting dynamic, and I'm sure we'll be able to see what's happening in terms of development over the next while.
I still think he'll be a big asset to us, though. I still think he'll be a big asset for us this season, but it's just it's just the constant offsides. It can be a real nightmare for us.
One player that I think is going to be an interesting dynamic over the next while is indeed Harry Maguire. And our friend Jarvis, as had been on fair tonight, says, the question is when, not if, will Maguire's weaknesses be revealed, and what will Rangnick do about it? Victor Lindelof went off injured at the weekend. United are not blessed with defensive options in there. Sean, what's your thoughts on Maguire? Because since Rangnick's come in, has he improved? Has he shown a little bit of fight? What do you think?
I think he's improved a little bit, yeah. I mean, obviously, but from when he got sent off against Watford, he was absolutely appalling this season. But he played against Villarreal, suspended for Chelsea game. He played against Arsenal, Palace, and Norwich. And I do think the defence does appear slightly more assured. It goes back to the point about us not playing well against Norwich, that I reckon on the roller we don't win that game. And I personally think with Maguire, there's still question marks. There was a couple of times in the game where Norwich launched the ball into the box and their attacker won headers from Maguire. I mean, I remember there was one late on where he out-jumped Maguire and De Gea made a great save. And I think that he's one player where we will see whether he improves or not. I do think he's improved slightly. I don't think he's been terrible, but I wouldn't say he's at his best yet. I think he's a long way off his best at the moment. But I mean, if you look at the tradition, if you look at Maguire's United career, he tends to play better in the second half of the season. So we'll wait and see whether that happens again. But yeah, certainly there are question marks about him. But at this moment, he's done okay so far.
I mean, Reece, Maguire's confidence and form was on the floor a couple of months ago. And obviously, we saw him in the game against Watford. He was absolutely horrendous in that game. But is this starting to feel like he's sowing the seeds of getting back a little bit to what he is capable of?
Potentially. I just think we have to wait and see. Every player has their weaknesses. I think the way he's being used by Rangnick, I'm getting contrast to Willie Orban. Complete contrast to Willie Orban's. Not a quick centre-back at all. But what he does have is very good passing range, and he's a physical player. And he had a player with pace play beside him. I think what you will see, though, in coming games is, I think Ralph is waiting for Varane to come back, and then you'll see. I think, because I said it on a previous show at the start of the season, Varane as a centre-back, he will exploit just how bad decisions have been in Man United over the past decade based on who we've actually recruited and decisions made. He exploits them because of what he's achieved, what his stature is in the game. So even if Varane gets injured again, say as an example, Varane got injured again, which I don't want. I'm just going to use it as an example.
Yeah.
Varane gets injured again, then we've got to watch for Maguire again. Maguire can have a great 2 months, say with Varane, then if Varane gets injured, we'll see how well Maguire does. Does he maintain that good performances, or will it drop? I think based on how he's played at times this season, it's the latter, not the former. It'll drop. But I'm hoping that's not the case. I think Varane was the signing that exploits a lot of issues because he's a phenomenal defender. We don't have anybody like him, like that class or that quality. I agree with this 100%. I think that is the ideal partnership. I think it makes more sense. They click well together. Well. And it's good to see that Lindelof's having a good season. I know Lindelof's not the most physical defender. I'm not going to argue that. But what Lindelof is a better ball carrier. Mm-hmm. He's actually better at progressing the ball than Maguire. I said this on a previous show and I was getting laughed at, but it's a fact. Lindelof is a better ball carrier than Harry Maguire. He's a much better ball carrier.
Yeah.
The only difference is Maguire's got a better physical presence. If Lindelof had that physical presence, we wouldn't need Harry Maguire in this team. We'd have Teddy Mengi or Eric Bailly as a backup option. Mm-hmm. But Maguire's a good defender. He's not great.
Yeah, I mean, Reece mentions Varane there, John. I mean, we've not really seen an awful lot of him, unfortunately, because of injuries and other circumstances. And that's been a real killer for United at the back, hasn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that before Solskjaer was sacked, I think we only kept clean sheets in 2 games this season. And that was when Varane was playing at Tottenham and Wolves.
So first back-to-back clean sheets since last season.
Yeah, and interestingly, Villarreal, Crystal Palace and Norwich, we managed to keep 3 clean sheets with Maguire-Lindelof partnership. I think what Reece mentions, I think if Maguire wasn't captain, he probably won't be playing, but that because he's kept him as captain, I don't see him being dropped in the near future. Having said that, I do think Lindelof has had the best season out of the 2, and I think one of the strengths for Lindelof is he has a number of assists where he's played the ball long through to Rashford, hasn't he? And Rashford tucks it in. That I think people tend to ignore that partnership between Lindelof and Rashford because there's been a few times where Lindelof has played the ball over the top and Rashford has ran onto it and scored. And I think that's a strength that Lindelof has. I do question whether Lindelof is good enough as centre back. I say he's not the strongest, but on form, you'd have to say that he's better than Maguire at this present moment. Although hopefully Maguire might be starting to build a bit of momentum now, and hopefully come the new year he should be back to his best. Hopefully.
Well, great mention by Norman, though. Great mention. I was just looking at the live chat. Get
your comments in. Norman's just coming in and saying Varane and Bailly best parents. So get your comments in, folks. What do you think is United's top centre-back partnership this season? You can also give us your comments on Rashford and range of other things we've talked a lot about tonight in this first half hour of the show. So much talking points from that Norwich game and plenty more to come on that and throughout. But let's move on and let's talk about a game that we hope is going to take place this midweek, but as things stand, it is very much up in the air because we are supposed to be playing Brentford in the Premier League. Manchester United have released a club statement in the last few hours saying that they could confirm that following PCR tests, confirmation of yesterday's positive lateral flow COVID-19 cases among the first team staff and players, the decision being taken to close down first team operations at the Carrington training complex for 24 hours. It has our information that we are still waiting to hear on the Premier League, according to Jonathan Schrager, although we have not heard, and you may now know once this goes out if the game is going ahead or not. But John, I'm going to come to you first on this. This is not an ideal situation for United at this busy juncture.
No, it isn't. Having to close down the training complex today, we don't know if the players trained earlier today. Doesn't look like it's certainly not ideal preparation. I think it will probably come downstairs, a lack of information. We've obviously had the COVID outbreak at the club, but we don't know how many people have been affected in terms of testing positive. You know, is it 3 or 4? If it's 3 or 4, then you should be able to get a squad in place for the Brentford game. If it's a lot more, let's say 7 or 8 or 9 players, then you're starting to having to rely on your fringe players. And like I say, you have the positive cases or any others displaying symptoms which haven't come back positive yet. You know, it's very much up in the air. We can't reliably be informed yet until we have all the information. I think it's right for United to consult the Premier League because, you know, it's not a great time. And like I say, you could have players who aren't positive but have been exposed to it with the players and coaches who have tested positive. Yes. And, you know, you could pass it on to other people like Tottenham, as we know. They tested positive. They recently played Norwich. Norwich were then have had a few positive cases. We've just played Norwich. We know our positive cases. It's not ideal. Now, if we go ahead with the game, it might be in a few days' time Brentford have players who test positive. You know, it's very difficult to assume. We also don't know whether the players have had their vaccines yet either. Exactly. You know, and some might have had a reaction to it. We don't know. Because I think it was about a month or 2 ago, there was a report saying that there wasn't a large uptake of Premier League players for having the vaccine. I don't know if that's changed, but it's certainly.
Well, I noticed there was a couple of players in the Bundesliga that weren't taken. You know,
I think
Joshua Kimmich is a
Kimmich,
But it's a very messy situation. Before I come to Reece, just read more of this article on Manchester United's official website. Given cancellation of training and disruption to the squad, and with the health of players and the staff the priority, the club is in discussion whether the Premier League match is safe for Tuesday's fixture against Brentford to go ahead, both from a COVID infection and player preparation perspective. Mo Khan has put an interesting comment here saying, if they were to call it off, they would have done it by now due to away fans travelling, I would think. I think this is a really messy situation. And Reece, I'm going to come to you on this. Where the hell do United go with from here?
I think if the FA had a brain, like in terms of like who actually runs the damn thing, if anyone had a brain, they would have made the decision sooner rather than now. I mean, it's 20-7, and we still don't know if the game's going ahead.
Yeah,
this decision could have been made at 12 o'clock this afternoon. This decision could have been made at 2 o'clock. Like, and they're just stalling. Like, if you're going to play the game, tell them now, because Mo Khan's right. There's fans already preparing for travel. Mm-hmm. You've also got other circumstances in terms of like teams having to get their players ready, in terms of like staff as well, COVID infections. Man United already made it public to the Premier League. This is already what's been done. Lateral flow tests. Like, this has all been announced from the club. We've had a COVID outbreak. We've made it aware. We've stopped operations. We've closed Carrington. We've done that. That's already been announced. So why does the Premier League, and mind you, I'm not surprised because the Premier League are absolutely stupid anyway. Like, why they actually are delaying this decision? If they're not going to play the game, then come out now and say, right, the game's not going ahead. Mm-hmm. So if anything, it shouldn't be done at the last minute. I agree with Matt's comment. I'm looking.
Well, he's going to just bringing that up. The Premier League called off the Man City Everton game last season, and
it should not be a last minute circumstance. It should be done now. It needs to be done now.
Completely agree. Does that then boil down to the Premier League in its entirety to actually come up with some form of policy to say you have to call out no less than 24 hours before a match can take place?
If they were competent, it would have been done by now.
Well, we would assume that they have got rules. I think the rules were saying that you have to have a certain number of players who were fit, including a goalkeeper. I'm not sure what the number was exactly. I think it was around 13 or 14. I'm not sure. This is why it all comes down to, well, how many of United's players have tested positive, and how many of them have been exposed and potentially displaying symptoms as well. This is why I say if you have 3 or 4 cases, you might be able to get away with it. But if it's more that are not just testing positive but are exposed to it, then it's as the situation. You could have a point where virtually every Premier League team is affected by it, because I mentioned the example of Tottenham, Norwich, United. It could be Brentford next.
COVID case as well. In fact, just breaking news on the BBC Sport website, a record 42 positive COVID cases in the Premier League in the past week. So this is an all-round issue here we're talking about.
How many, sorry?
42.
Oh.
The most recorded in the league over a 7-day period, the highest since January. So that's what we're sort of dealing with here, gentlemen. It's certainly interesting. As it says, Brighton, Tottenham, Leicester, Man United and Villa have all confirmed cases, with United's game at Brentford in doubt. Thomas Frank has said that his side are planning to play the game. All of United's players tested negative before their win at Norwich, but some tested positive before training on Sunday morning. We've seen a couple of interesting comments coming in. Before we kind of talk on about Brentford, Deepanshu's actually made an interesting point. When Pogba will come back in the future, then what should be the midfield under Ranić? That's going to be interesting. What's your thoughts on that?
I made a point. I'm not sure Pogba will fit into the system. Only time will tell. I personally think, I'm not the biggest fan of it, that the Fred McTominay partnership is possibly going to be the main two that guard the back four going forward. I don't see that changing. He could potentially play off the left, like on the, where Bruno has been playing, like the semi, I don't know how to explain it, like semi on the wing, semi on the centre. I personally think that might be where Pogba plays, and that tends to be his best position usually. So if he's going to play anywhere, it would be there. But would he dislodge Bruno? I'm not sure he would. So I find it difficult to see where he will fit in. And as Rangnick said last week, does Pogba want to stay? If he doesn't, does he get in the team? I'm not sure he does. So only time will tell.
Reece, anything to comment on that?
It's a fair comment. I think it does come down to what his decision is in his head. Does he want to stay? Does he want to go? I think it will reflect on that. I think if he does want to stay, then get it dealt with. Actually, make it known.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't want to stay, then find the best position for him. If he wants to move, then get him moved. Because frankly, we need to start preparing for the second half of the season. We need to start preparing for the summer as well. Like who's staying, who's going. That's going to come into factor. If he wants to stay, then get your absolute clown of an agent to shut his mouth.
Yeah.
If you want to go, then get the best deal for you now. But anything else, I don't really see happening. But I think based on current form, Bruno's not having a great period of time at the minute. I think if Pogba was to come back, have a very good game. If Pogba was to come back and have a good game and played in that role, I think he could displace Bruno at the moment, because Bruno's not having the best of time at the moment. But then again, Bruno could have Bruno can go on, have 3, 4, 5 good games in a row, get back to his best, and then that will just continue. It really does depend. So I don't see him getting dislodging team. I think you'll see what happened in the second half of last season when he was an impact sub. Especially we all remember the Milan game where he's an impact sub. I think it'll be something similar to that, but it depends on where he plays. I think he'll play in the 2 forward roles. I don't see him playing deep. I hope to hell he doesn't play deep. But the one thing Rangnick will want is when he's playing is not to slow play down. Got to keep it moving, got to keep playing free flow and quick football, press the opposition don't slow it down to let others move off you. They're supposed to be moving with him. If they don't, then that's just going to be a detriment. So, but we need to make decisions in January first. Like, key decisions need to be made.
Yeah, very interesting comment and question as well. Let's bring it back to the Brentford game. Let's assume the game does indeed go ahead. Let's talk about Brentford's season so far. They did win that game on Friday night against Watford 2-1. They won it with that late penalty. What have you made of Brentford this season, John? Because I've watched a couple of their games and they're certainly quite entertaining to watch. I mean, Ivan Toney was ill for the game against Watford, didn't play, believed to be back in the frame for this game on Tuesday. But what's your thoughts on Brentford this season?
Yeah, I've been dead impressed with Brentford, and if the game does go ahead tomorrow, I think it'll be a very tough game for us. Like you say, they had a brilliant comeback win against Watford the other night. Yeah, just certain games I watched when they drew 3-3 with Liverpool, they didn't just sit back. They almost went toe-to-toe with Liverpool, and it was one of the best games this season. I also watched them against Chelsea, and the last half an hour or so, they absolutely battered Chelsea's goal, and they was without Mendy. They were so unlucky to lose that game 1-0. I think a few weeks ago they did have a bit of a blip where they lost a couple of games. But yeah, I personally think in terms of relegation battles, I don't think. I think in many ways they're kind of like the Leeds of last season in many ways, where they'll give anyone a game, and they'll probably pull out a few surprise results. But I think they're perhaps a bit more organised than that Leeds team, and because they're defensively sound as well as good going forwards, and I think they will pose a threat to us, I think. And I think we better be on our guard, because especially after the result against Norwich, we don't know what United's team will turn up with. Brilliant against Palace, but only won 1-0. But we have played Norwich. We were awful. If we were playing Brentford on Saturday, we would have lost that game. I've probably lost it comfortably, I feel. So if we want to get 3 points there tomorrow, we really have to perform, because if you underperform against Brentford, I think you'll either draw or lose the game.
Before I come on to Reese, because I think you made some really good points, John. Evan has come up with an interesting comment. He says, the reason Brentford are doing so well is because the other teams are undermining them. And also, Jarvis Cocker's made a really good comment here, saying, love my dialect and my Scottish genuine asking. Yes, I'm from the northeast of Scotland, just north of Aberdeen. So there you go. Reese, what have you made of Brentford this season? Because they've actually got a very equal home and away form, 10 points at home, 10 points away. They're going to be an interesting side to keep an eye on this season, but this game could be a very intriguing match, I think, if it does indeed go ahead, of course.
There's two teams that I enjoy watching in the Premier League from a neutral perspective: Southampton and Brentford. I watched some of the Brentford's games last season, the Championship. They were absolutely outstanding. The playoff final, even better. Just the way they dominate teams is great. Like, they recruit smartly. Obviously, Thomas Frankie's recruiting like Danish players. Obviously, he's building a core. It's similar to Wolves in that respect, except Wolves are better with the money in terms of bringing in better players. I think Brentford actually recruit better.
Yeah,
their playing style is great to watch. I do agree with Grant about them being undermined. Liverpool undermined them. I think
not me.
I think Chelsea to a degree undermined them as well. I think the one team that thought they were going to batter them was Arsenal. That was funny to watch on the first game of the season, the Friday Night Football. I watched that game, and
I strongly fancy Brentford to win that game on the opening day of the season.
Oh yeah, so did I.
First game at home, full stadium, fans really up for it. That was
and you can also, I think this is their first season. This is their first season with a crowd in the new stadium as well. And it feels like a bit of a fortress atmosphere as well, which is adding greatly to their performances.
It's It's their first top flight season, I think, in 80. I think it's 85 years.
Yeah.
I think something like that. So it's been a long period, but they're a very strong, powerful, aggressive side, and they press really well. They counter press, similar to like sort of teams that you really want to go up against. I think they are a breath of fresh air at the Premier League. It's a team that the league has actually missed for quite some time in terms of promoted opposition.
Absolutely
And
agree.
I've had them to finish 11 for 12 like all season. I think you'll see. I think once the injuries start to dip down from them, I think that's the only thing that's been hampering them at the minute is injuries. Once they start to dial down, you see them get back to their best. They will just fall short of the top 10 because they are good enough to get into the top 10. They'll just fall short. They're a great side, and I don't normally like quoting people, but just to quote Gary Neville, the way we played against Norwich, lethargic and it was a sloppy performance, and he said we get battered if we come up against a decent side like Brentford. He's spot on. If this game goes on tomorrow and we play like we did against Norwich, we are going to get battered 2-3-0. And I hate it I hate like saying shit about the club I support, but you have to at least recognise a good side. Brentford are a good side. I still think if we actually turn up, if we play them like we did against Palace, we'll control that game, we'll beat them. But if we turn up sloppy like we did against Norwich, we've even got a hope in hell.
I mean, I'm scrolling through Brentford's results. We've talked a lot about the Arsenal game, but they're still in the EFL Cup. They're in the quarterfinals of that. They won at Wolves, and Wolves are a very tough team to beat at Molineux. They won at West Ham, who are currently in the top four. Liverpool.
That was a last-minute winner at West Ham, I think.
Yeah. And I think some of the results, people think they're freakish. I don't think they're freakish at all. I think they've worked hard. They beat Everton recently. Obviously, they won at Watford on the Friday night. They got appointed Leeds. They're a very competent team. And let's talk about some of their key players. I mean, Ivan Toney, I think, has been excellent for them this season. But it's not just all about him, isn't it? I mean, I've been really impressed with Canos in the middle of the pitch. You mentioned Mbeumo there, Reese. I completely agree.
I absolutely adore him. I think Mbeumo and Toney are going to be targets for the top six in the summer. I wouldn't be surprised if Ivan Toney stays. I wouldn't be surprised if Ivan Toney stays at Brentford. I think if Brentford survive, then he'll stay. If Brentford get relegated, he's gone. I don't think Brentford are going to get relegated. I think Mbeumo has a very good chance of making to a top six side as well. He's very good. I said the fact they're building a very strong core group, and that's what you need to survive in the league. They're not doing a Norwich. They're not doing a Norwich where they're just hoping that the same squad comes up, they'll take their big 100 million and then just go back down the Championship. Rinse, repeat. Rinse, promote, relegation, repeat. That's Norwich City. At least Brentford have got a clear plan. They want to stay up. And I just like the way that Thomas Frank have gone about his business with this team. It works really well. And when they really want to go up against you and batter you, they get stuck in. That's what I like about them. They're a team that knows what they're doing.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep that comment up again by Evan saying that
he's spot on for a Chelsea fan.
So well is because the other teams undermine them. They always seem to go relatively well against the big teams, and this is the sort of game that has dodgy written all over it. And Jarvis has made a really good point. Christian Nordgaard is their key player. He's a massive defensive midfield. I completely agree. I like Canos. I mentioned that earlier on. It's a real pity for me that David Raya is injured at the moment. I think he's a really good keeper as well. But I think their biggest asset is their manager. I really, really rate Thomas Frank. I think he's a top quality coach. And I think if he was to leave, I really would worry for Brentford. But John, I want to come to you because we've talked about some of the key players.
Yeah, but I think the manager is a very good manager for what's for them. I honestly think when you think Brentford, the Leeds example last season, where they do have similarities, it was that it took them a long time to get into the Premier League. I think did Brentford fail to get through the playoffs like 9 times or something? Yes. I can't remember. And I think when they eventually got into the Premier League, they're saying, we're here now, we're going to make a real effort and we're going to make sure that we're hard to beat and we'll give it our all. And I think maybe the disappointment over many years not getting into Premier League, that's allowed them now that they're in the Premier League to say we're not going to be like a Watford or a Norwich because we're up and down, we're up and down. This might be the only time we ever get to be in the Premier League, and we're going to do everything we can to ensure that we stay in it for as long as possible. And that's why I've been impressed with them, because they're very well organised. Like I say, you can't expect to win if you play badly against them, and I think it's a tough test. I think it's potentially one of, I'll go as far as saying this could be one of the toughest away games we could play this season, personally, because they're just so well organised. And I think it'll certainly be Rangnick's test, first big test, I feel. And I think that this is where it comes back to the lack of preparation, that how will we be on our A game tomorrow? I do think we can win, but it'll be a very narrow win. And I think like I said, we really do need to be on our A game to beat them, because I think they're a very well organised team, and the manager is responsible for that. And like I say, they do have a number of good players.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Brentford have really been excellent to watch this season. And I'm going to go back to Mo's comment, because I think this is one real worry of mine as well, going into tomorrow night's game. Worried about Mbeumo versus Maguire. I think that would be a very, very interesting dynamic. And Tony coming back from injury, he's a very, very good player as well. But, I mean, we talked a lot about where those two guys, but they've got a lot of good quality players on the pitch, haven't they? They've got a good dynamic. They utilise the Danish market very well. And I just think that they're the sort of team that the fans could really be their 12th man tomorrow night if the game goes ahead, of course.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The heart of the defence is very good as well. Like Pontus Jansson, he's been fantastic for them in terms of the heart of defence. He commands it really well. He leads by example. I think it's not about... I think they recognise in terms of quality, they're not the best team in the league. They know that. Yeah. They're not the best in the bottom 10. But what they do recognise is, as a core squad, playing as a team, they can beat anybody if they get stuck in. They know that. They're organised. They play a back three very well. They transition into a back five when defending, but it's like very tight, compact. They use the width of their wing backs really well, which exploits the space, which gets Mbeumo, and when he's playing Tony, lets them get in. Big target man, exploit defences. That's what we need to do. Jarvis mentioned Norgard. Norgard is a fantastic midfielder, but you just look at like the whole core group. Like, some of those players obviously are going to be earmarked for bigger clubs, but just the way they recruit really well, you can tell if one player was to go, they recruit really well. Look at, I think the best example is losing Ollie Watkins.
Completely.
They sold him. Next thing you know, here comes Ivan Toney. Boom, he has the best ever season as a striker.
Or any player.
Because when they're in the Championship, they were calling that from free BMW, Ben Rama, and Mbeumo, Watkins.
They plan so well, and I think that's the key. Is they can earmark a player really well, and it fits their squad. I allude back to what I said earlier on about Man United, where we should take a City approach, where stick to the style we're going to play, which has to be the gegenpress or an aggressive style of pressing. You've got to sign players that are specifically for that style, and you stick with it. So you've got to keep ironing out the weak, and you keep bleeding in. That's what they do. If they see an opportunity where they need to sell a player on because it's right, they give a player the best opportunity they can. They gave Watkins another year. They sold him for big money. They brought in Ivan Toney. He had a fantastic season last year, kept him when people thought he would go.
Yeah.
That's what Brentford are doing, and Brentford are really smart with that. So I think in terms of good play, smart recruitment, they're one of the best in the league. It's what they do now. They're going to give us a battle. They're going to give us a test. It's not an easy game. 100% not an easy game. Can we beat them? Yes. Can they beat us? Absolutely. If we don't turn up, they can cause us massive problems. They've done it to Liverpool. They've done it to Chelsea. So I think there's a matter of what happens if the game goes ahead. United have to control the game. They've got to dominate the midfield, and we need to force this team's mistakes. If we can force them back, control the ball like we did against Palace, who are also a very good controlled side, we'll have this game wrapped up.
Yeah. Well, we're
If
going
it
to come
goes
on
ahead.
to selecting our teams and give our predictions as we're wrapping things up very quickly. Just one comment from Jarvis. I would gladly take Nordgaard at United. He's been a hard worker, never does mistakes, and he's even better when he plays for Denmark. It's that Dutch-Danish style of play. Gents, we are very much coming to the end of the show. Very quickly, give us your starting 11 for the hopefully game that kicks off against Brentford tomorrow. John, I'm going to come to you first.
Yeah, well, we don't know which players are tested positive yet, so not sure yet. And I'd assume that De Gea will be goalkeeper. I'd assume Delo and Tellez, although Shaw was on the bench, but I reckon maybe Delo and Tellez probably. Doesn't look like Lindelof will play, so I'm not sure if Varane's fit. So I assume it'll probably be Bailly and Maguire. I think he'll stick with McFred. In terms of the front four, I think Sancho will play. Ronaldo will. I think Greenwood will probably start. I don't think Rashford will start. Will Bruno start? I don't think he should. And that's one contention whether it'll be Bruno or potentially Van der Beek. I'm not sure. But that will be my 11.
Reece, what changes would you make from the Norwich game for this Brentford match if you were selecting the team? Would you make any?
I would play the same team, except I would play the same team, except I would drop Rashford for Mason Greenwood, 100%.
That's exactly what I would do as well, and that's really great.
I think if Bruno has one more poor game, then I think Bruno will get dropped. I'm hoping this is a good game for him to just get back into his best form.
Yeah.
But Rashford really needs to have a good game as well. If he plays, he needs a proper kick up the arse because he is not in the best of form, and frankly, it's getting to the point where he does need to get dropped. So like whoever plays needs to have a good game. Otherwise, on the bench for the next game against Brighton at the weekend.
Right, last question to you both. It actually comes from Mark Biggs. Mark, a great contributor, of course, to All for United. What's everyone's score predictions for tomorrow's game? I'm going to be slightly negative here. I'm going to go 1-1 because I don't think United have got the quality to get the 3 points at Brentford. I'm a bit concerned about us defensively. I don't see us keeping a clean sheet. And I think we'll do well to get a point, so I'll go 1-1.
I'm going, if United turn up the way we did against Palace, 2-0. If we play like we did against Norwich,
a lot of people go for 2-1 here.
If we play like we did against Norwich, then I'm going 1-1, but I'm going to go 2-0. I think we'll play like we did against Palace. I think you'll actually see a proper performance. None of that bollocks that was at the weekend. That was an absolute disgraceful performance, and I guarantee the manager was not happy with it. So I think you will see a response. So I'm going 2-0.
And John, last word to you on the prediction for the game.
Yeah, I'm in two minds there. I do think 2-1. We could easily draw or even lose this game, but I'm going to go slightly differently, and I think I'm going to go for another 1-0 victory.
A 1-0 victory. Well, it's certainly going to be very interesting. As we said, Mark has went with 2-1. Weekly Armchair Sports, though, as we said, very appropriate contributor to the show, has gone 2-1 United, and Jarvis, who's been very popular on the comments tonight, has gone 1-0 is my prediction as well. Well, that just about brings us to the end of another episode of All for United. Thanks very much to Reece and John for joining me for my debut presenting on this fantastic channel for Manchester United fans. You can hear everything here first about all United content and much more. Reece, we can find you at Devils Rising on the old Twitter. John, where can people find you, my good man?
Pardon?
Where can they find you on the socials?
It's John_Kermode2, KERMODE.
Excellent stuff. Well, go and check out those guys. They're doing some really great content on their channels, and they really know a lot of great stuff on Manchester United. Remember, please like and subscribe All for United. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, on Instagram, wherever you may find us. We have the fantastic Bridging the Gap returning tonight at 8:30 to get the latest around women's football. So please go and check that out. Really great content there as always. Do join us again for some more All for United content in the very near future. But until then, it's been an absolute blast. Thanks very much for tuning into the show, and all the very best to you. Thanks very much.